Okay, today we're going to talk about base 10 understanding, what happens when you multiply and divide with numbers, focusing around a 10, and we're all going to use, for every single one, we're going to use the number 600. So we're going to talk about what happens with that 600 whenever you're multiplying by tens or factors of 10, dividing by tens or factors of 10, or multiplying by tenths and other numbers like tenths, hundreds, thousands. And you're going to start to see a pattern develop. So if we have 600 times 10, you multiply the 6 and the 1, you get a 6, and you count your zeros. You have 1, 2, 3 zeros. If you multiply 600 by 100, multiply your non-zero numbers. 6 times 1 is 6, and you have 4 zeros. Should put a comma. If you multiply 600 times 1,000, you multiply your non-zeros, 6, and you count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and put your commas. Noticing that each time your product is getting another zero, 6,000, 60,000, 600,000. It's getting 10 times bigger each time. So you could guess if I did 600 times 10,000, I would have even more zeros. My answer is getting bigger because whenever you're seeing the multiplication sign, what you should be thinking of is x equals groups of. Multiplication is groups of. So this is saying I have 600 groups of $10. I have 600 people with $10, 600 people with $100, 600 groups of $1,000, 600 people with $1,000. If I was to go the other way, let's take that 600, I'm breaking up 600 amongst 10 people. So you know my answer is going to be smaller. Well, how much smaller? Well, if I have $600 and I have 10 people, everybody gets $60. Okay, now if I have $600 and 100 people, each person is going to get $6. Okay, now, but what happens if I have, think about this, $600 and 1,000 people? We don't have enough money for everybody to get $6 because there's just not enough money to spread around. They will get 6, but it's not going to be $6. It's actually going to be 6 dimes. So notice I am losing each time, but I still have the factor of 6 with it, except that last one is not $6, it is 6 dimes. And if we are multiplying, remember multiplication equals groups of, what happens, that's an ugly U, groups of, what happens if we're multiplying by a fraction? Well, you got to think about what a fraction is. Like 1/10 is like 1 dime, 0.1. 1/100th is like 1 penny, 0.01. And 1,000th is 0.001. So kind of keep that in your head while we're doing it. 600, remember that's our base number, times 1/10 equals what? Well, you have 600 groups of. How much money is in each group? You have 600 groups of dimes. So you have 600 groups of 1 dime. If I was to talk about that as money, that's $60. If I have 600 groups of 1 penny, if I have 600 groups of 1 penny, that means I have $6. But if I have 600 groups of 1/1000th, which is like 10 times smaller than a penny, that means I have 0.06. So notice that each time for this one, you're adding zeros. This one you're kind of taking away, and this one you're kind of taking away. You're also, another thing you're doing is you're also jumping your place value. Look at this one. 600, doing different colors, 600 times 10. Well, there's a imaginary decimal right here, 600, imaginary decimal right here. It's multiplying by 10, so you're jumping over the decimal one place. 600 times 10 is 6,000, which is what we got up here. Let's say I was to go another one, 600 times 100. I still have that same decimal, but I'm not jumping it over one place value, I'm jumping it over two place values, 1, 2, 1, 2. What happens when you're dividing? Well, obviously your answers aren't going to get bigger. You still have that decimal, but if I'm dividing by 100, I still have that 600 with the decimal right here, but since my answers aren't getting bigger, they're getting smaller, I'm jumping the decimal back two places, 1, 2, which $6, that's the answer we got right over here. And if I was to kind of go off of a cheat sheet, if I was to make a cheat sheet, if you have multiplying by 10, you're jumping your decimal over one time. If you're multiplying by 100, you're jumping your decimal over two times. If you're multiplying by 1,000, you're jumping your decimal over three times. Notice all these jumps are to the right. If I was dividing by 10, I'm jumping my decimal this way. If I'm dividing by 100, I'm jumping my decimal over this way twice. If I'm dividing by 1,000, I'm jumping over my decimal 1, 2, 3, and all my jumps are going this way, backwards. My numbers are getting smaller. And then if I look at my fractions, which is an even weirder concept, multiplying by a tenth, I'm jumping my decimal back because I'm having groups of dimes. I'm multiplying by a 100, I'm jumping my decimal back twice. Groups of pennies. If I have 1/1000th, my answer is going to be even smaller, jumping my decimal back three times. 1, 2, 3. Groups of stuff that's smaller than even pennies. And my answers are getting smaller. My decimal is jumping this way. Base 10 understanding is a weird concept. Just remember, the first ones, my answers are getting bigger because I have larger groups. The second one, which is down here, my answers are getting smaller because I'm breaking them up. And over here, my answers are also getting smaller because I'm multiplying by factors smaller than 1.